Hello, I'm Danish and welcome to TUSB Conversation Starters. June is Pride Month, a time with deep historical importance. But amidst social media hashtags and bandit content, is the real pride getting lost? Or authentic voices getting drowned? We have with us today author and communication consultant Sharif Rangnekar, who shares from his own experience growing up as a gay man in India. We spoke to him about the significance of celebrating pride and how organizations can do it in a more meaningful way. There's a lot of noise happening around Pride Month with companies jumping in with campaigns and speaking about inclusion. As a gay man, what are your thoughts when you see businesses celebrating pride?
Well, it is problematic at times, and I think, but it's also part of some of the solutions uh, from a point of view of society, from a point of view of careers for people, etc. But I think what gets lost uh, in the way pride gets celebrated by a large number of corporations. I'm generalizing. I'm not saying that all corporations aren't genuine or authentic about how they go about it or what work they've done internally in an organization.
Mhm.
But by and large, there is a sense that corporations don't know pride, and and I would take it a little further beyond corporations. I think even press doesn't understand pride, as a result of which no one checks or sort of questions what is uh, the International Pride Month all about.
Hmm, hmm,
So at times it feels a little like appropriation, and I'll explain why.
hmm,
You know, Pride has a history of the Stonewall riots, which goes back to early 1970s.
hmm,
It, and in the Indian context, some of us believe that one such example, uh, in the Indian context, that is, was in Lucknow in
hmm,
2001, when a
hmm,
large number of people from our community, trans, gay, etc., were picked up by the police,
hmm,
dumped into jail for 40 plus days. People were
hmm,
beaten up in jail.
hmm,
This sort of situation happens sporadically in different parts of the country. This happens in homes. There is still conversion therapy which takes place. There is people who have compelled and forced into heterosexual marriages
hmm,
when that's not their choice, and that's not how they are inclined sexually. Um, there are people who face hate in colleges, in schools, in universities, etc. There's bullying of all kinds. There's harassment by law enforcers. And let's put it very plainly, uh, there is a lack of understanding both of the Nalsa judgment, which is 2014 on trans
hmm,
genders,
hmm, hmm,
or on 377, which has to do with homosexuals.
hmm,
First, the imagination that we are free
hmm,
is highly misplaced. We don't have a number of civil rights. We don't have, and it's not limited only to same-sex marriage or anything like that. It's a vast space. So now, when someone is wanting to celebrate this,
hmm,
our lives, how much do they know about our lives? Do they
hmm,
know what it is to even stand up today and speak,
hmm, hmm,
uh, walk down on a pride march? Do they know the mental health issues that individuals go through? Do
hmm,
they know what it is to go through transition?
hmm,
When you are not, when you believe and you strongly know that the assigned gender is not the gender you or sexuality that you identify with.
hmm, hmm,
Um, do they know what it is when you want to wear makeup, put nail paint, and what it is to walk in society in different places?
hmm, hmm,
So when you're celebrating something, uh, it's sort of almost an appropriation for the simple reason it's almost like a rape victim. Shouldn't the rape victim speak for oneself?
hmm,
Yes, you can have others who join the chorus, right?
hmm,
So I think what I've seen quite often happen is corporations try to take the lead without having lived that experience.
hmm,
They take the mic away and then
hmm,
it's almost like cinema to a great extent, where you want to sugarcoat things when you want to appear that you really care, but you really don't know enough to be empathetic or to care.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So that I think becomes a huge problem in sections of the community. It's called homo capitalism.
Mm.
Uh, it's called, the word appropriation is also used, because we need to speak for ourselves, and we do, and we
Mm.
want to. And we know our journeys. We know why we walk down the streets at Pride
Mm.
across different parts of the country, different times of the year. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm.
we know why we wear what we wear and what we say and what language we
Mm.
use. So I think that needs to be addressed very uh, specifically by most corporations to understand pride.
Okay, takes me to my second question that,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
should companies be collaborating with the community then? Let's say, be it DNI experts, NGOs, activists, both for Pride Month as well as ongoing long-term cultural shift.
There are a lot of things happening across the country today. There are a lot of events, there are workshops, um, there are festivals, there are a large number of things that are going on
Hmm.
in and led by the community.
Hmm.
And I think if corporations actually believe, as they claim in Pride Month or whenever else, that they're looking at an authentic change, they're looking at a cultural change, they need to be supporting these initiatives of the community.
Hmm.
They could
Hmm.
even, they could even sometimes, if they don't have the funds, give space, you know, at their large offices, let workshops be held there,
Hmm.
because it all comes at a cost. We need to understand that money is very difficult for a lot of the NGOs to get. And
Hmm.
during this COVID 2 years, the amount of money that has been raised directly by the community for the community, particularly for the trans gender folks in our community who were on the streets, who didn't have money, didn't have food, didn't have shelter.
Hmm.
There's plenty out there that corporations can come forward and help with, and I think that's where social change comes in. That's where support comes in. That's where the bond is built between corporations and organizations, and
Hmm.
it's a bond which is very relevant to society to
Hmm.
bring that kind of change. And I also know certain organizations which do a lovely thing. They have these days in the year
Hmm.
where their own staff goes out and works on ground. Okay, I know it may sound a little symbolic because it's 1 day or 2 days in the year or 4 days in the year,
Hmm.
whatever. But
Hmm.
it's fantastic if they go out there and they work with the community. They start understanding much better, what it is to be queer. What is
Hmm.
that life? How are you saving a trans person life? How are you engaging with the trans? There's so much that I think corporations do, and it's also very much part of I think the fifth charter on inclusion from the United Nations, where you visibly go out and support, let's say, an event. There are film festivals taking place. Like the beginning of June is the Kashish Festival.
Hmm.
There's the Rainbow Lit Fest, which I also organize.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
There is another festival which takes place in Pune by Mist.
Hmm.
There is the Queer Lit, which also takes place in Chennai.
Hmm.
Then there are organizations, plenty, who are looking for funds to provide shelter to the community. So,
Hmm.
I think with also the CSR budgets being available, I think this is where companies can come in, because that's when you're having sort of an engagement which is beyond 1 month.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
And that changes life.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a valid point. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Right. And so, in this situation, what role does a workplace play for a queer people in terms of financial independence and extra?
See, I think we know in India that you have a large number of people who leave small towns, villages, etc., come to big cities, and some of them are qualified,
Hmm.
using the word, to perhaps get a job at a corporation, institution, whatever it might be. Now, their needs are usually to support family back home.
Hmm.
Okay, or maybe they're just married and they have to create their own family, so they need to support that.
Yeah.
Now, in the case of a lot of queer people, they're chucked out of home. That's one. There are others who are uncomfortable at home and they cannot come out because they fear they will be thrown out or they will be beaten up, violently, abused verbally and physically. Uh, There are people who just don't feel safe in that space. So for them, they can't even turn to the family for basic sustenance.
Hmm.
So the job for them becomes a completely different sort of need. The workplace is about creating that little queer space, that little space of independence, freedom to just be who you are. And that
Hmm.
can only come if you have money in the pocket,
Hmm.
that you can pay the rent for a 1 BHK for a small room. You can, it's those kind of needs that fulfilling a need which is very personal and not entirely economic in the general sense of how we look at careers,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know. So I
Hmm.
think that distinction needs to be made when it comes to the queer community.
Hmm. Hmm. And what are some of the biggest challenges or say discriminations that the LGBTQ plus community still faces in workplace? And
I
how
think,
can and also then how can companies sensitize their workforce and leaders toward these issues?
see, I think if you go by data and research, even globally, so I take the global route on
Hmm.
this,
Mm-hmm.
is there's an Accenture report which is of 2020. So there they said only 40% of the LGBT plus community comes out at the workplace. Okay,
Hmm.
and there's a sense of risk, fear, discomfort. There's a general feeling that like 57% believe that their sexuality will hinder their career.
Hmm. Hmm.
And now that's just part of the thing. There is 14% who feel they're welcome. 14, just 14. It's a 2020 global report.
Hmm.
Now, that report ends essentially with the sense that a culture is missing. And that's something I've always believed in, that you need to create a culture because you need to have policies, you have laws. But let's look at the NCR and let's look at the city of Delhi. We
Hmm.
have all the laws, but we have a culture which somehow violates every possible law, right? We
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
seem to care.
Hmm.
So we haven't worked enough. We have all the laws. We haven't worked enough on the culture end of it. And
Hmm.
culture, as anyone who works in this workplace inclusion space, will tell you that you have to start somewhere with tolerance first. Tolerance
Hmm.
doesn't mean acceptance, so you have to move towards acceptance. From acceptance, you move towards inclusion, and then you become champions, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
In that sort of journey, you're recreating your workplace. You know, you are becoming a place where everyone feels free, where everyone doesn't need to really even carry their identity because it's all so sort of normalized,
Hmm.
that you may
Hmm.
not have to use the pronouns. The pronouns need to be used today to
Hmm.
identify, and that some corporations don't follow.
Yeah.
The language in the organizations, what language do you use? Are you, even the language that commoditizes a woman
Hmm.
is very uncomfortable for a queer person. It's almost like a red flag. The
Hmm.
humor, you know, there's a lot of humor you've seen in cinema which uh,
Cross.
doesn't,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah. Hmm.
caricature rather than character, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Um, when you're called out I mean, not called out, called and invited to a get together with work folks from the work,
Hmm.
colleagues, there's almost an assumption, like if it's a man, he'll say, listen, just bring your girl along. If a woman is inviting you, they'll say, bring your man along. This is an assumption. You
Hmm.
know, culture, when you change that culture, you assume that a person might be single, the person might be queer, the person could be trans amongst the queer, the person could be gay, and so they may be having a man or may not be.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe they want to bring their date, you know,
Hmm.
could be a lesbian. They're just that whole rainbow
Hmm.
out
Hmm.
there. That's very important in a culture to realize that not everyone is the same. That
Hmm.
not everyone's preferences, inclinations, instincts, choices are not the same.
Hmm.
You know, and the moment queer people face these sort of questions and circumstances or situations,
Hmm.
they may seem very little to the heterosexuals, the majority, because it's part and parcel of their lives. But if
Hmm.
you want to include, then you need to realize that your life is not the only life,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know. And immediately a red flag goes up. People sort of go back into the closet if they were even trying to come out. They
Hmm.
go into a shell, So they are already on in that the they're already cautioned internally, so they never free in that kind of you know. Then I'll just give you. I mean, very recently, one of my friends, a lesbian working in an organization which claims to be inclusive, is facing a boss who's telling her that he speaks very harshly, and I've just seen him in some of the messages. Just horrific. I would not accept it even if I were heterosexual. But the person tells also this woman, keep your mental health problems with you at your home. Hello, we're trying to create a seamless society. We're trying to create a culture. You can't keep everything at home. Just imagine if you were sexually assaulted, can you come back to work and not fear that if someone touches you in a certain way, that you might not have that fear revisiting you? I mean, just how can you not think of that? So empathy is very important in bringing that cultural change. So I would say these are the things that organizations should know, and this has to come from the top. Leadership needs to be trained. Leadership needs to be empathetic. Leadership needs to keep in mind the bottom line, but must know that to get those numbers, that economics are emotions as well. Every penny is an emotion. Don't forget the heart in that, because when you have more money in your pocket, you feel a little more free to consume, maybe for your family, maybe you can improve quality of life. Those are all emotions. Don't look at bottom line outside the emotion of people. Okay. Yeah. So I think and they shouldn't jump in. Sorry, they shouldn't jump in until they're ready to be an inclusive workplace.
Sharif, that takes me to my last question. What your message to young people who want to come out of the closet, especially when they're opening up at work?
See, I think coming out is not a one-time job sort of thing, and it's not also a compulsion for anyone. It's a personal choice. But when people decide to come, and it's the workplace is just one major place, right? They know most queer people have a gut feel, and that would be for a youngster too. But I would say you need to feel safe to come out. You need to have a few allies, people you can completely trust, explicitly, where you can share everything that you wish to about your life. It's like any the kind of conversations heterosexuals generally have when they're sharing things about their lives, where they're going shopping, what are they eating, the place they went to, what happened at home. Oh my God, my child is this or my child. When you have those kind of conversations, that obviously we may not have children, but those are the kind of that comfort that you can share everything is very important before you decide to come out and who you come out with. So you usually know who you can trust, and I think that's the most important part. That gut feel, that sense of safety, sense of comfort, the sense that the person who's going to listen to you sort of can extend themselves to understand. They will never be fully knowing of what you really go through, but that you can share it is something you would know, and from your interactions with people. So I'd say look at these 3-4 things before you come out, and because your career and your economic independence that comes is also dependent on that, and that has a huge impact, as we said earlier, on queer existence and queer life.